My name's Ryan Aller. I'm a detective with the Belmont County Sheriff's Office. I've been working homicide cases for 15 years. The day I got the call, I was at home sick. I hadn't taken a sick day in probably 10 years.
Aller.
We don't get a lot of homicide calls. So when I got this call, I had to respond. It's all hands on deck.
So what are we looking at?
Gunshot. Close range from the looks of it.
When I arrived, I was briefed by Detective Rusty Lucy.
I told Ryan there was no forced entry, there was no windows broken out, nothing seemed to be ransacked. We had a male who was laying face down, appeared to be shot in the back.
Position of the body tells us as investigators that the shooter was behind the person. Was it a interrupted burglary? Was it someone that the victim knew, that they felt comfortable turning their back on?
We discovered his wallet with his ID. The victim has cash on him, which makes us believe that this wasn't some type of breaking and entering or home invasion type scenario.
It did not take us very long to ID the victim at all. The victim used to be the mayor several years ago of Powhatan.
Yeah, that's the mayor, all right. Damn.
Marvin Brown was a very popular person in the community.
Look up at me one more time. There we go.
Marvin Brown had been mayor for a couple of years in Powhatan. He was a big, hearty, husky character. He would help anybody who needed it, but he wouldn't take any nonsense.
When Chief Investigator Aller realizes the identity of that victim, he certainly knows this is going to be different. Murder is ugly, but high-profile murder is infinitely worse. It draws the maximum attention of the press and the public. It makes a very difficult investigation.
There was no weapon found anywhere near the body or anywhere near the scene in general. In the bedroom, next to the bed was a blanket.
And then near the living room area, we discovered a 9mm shell casing. But our main concern was, where's the bullet?
They see evidence of ricochet off a wall, but they don't find a slug. They think that's very odd.
The bullet must have been pretty easy to see for the killer to take it. Because if they would have took the time to really look for it, they would have took the casing as well. That bullet must have been glowing.
The big question is always why. Why is this gentleman laying in his hunting cabin, shot in his back?
The family gathered at Marvin's residence, and we needed to start talking to them.
One of the worst things I did in my entire career is make death notifications, and it is absolutely the most horrible thing you can imagine.
It was a pretty big shock for the family.
Detective Aller said that there was foul play, that somebody shot him.
I was so upset and mad that somebody did that to him. Shot him in the back. You're going to get me crying. My dad was a tough guy. He was 70 years old, and you still couldn't keep up with him. He was very healthy. He came back from the Army, and Dad was a union leader down at the steel mill, where he worked at for about 30 years.
At the time when the mill started closing down, he was resilient. It's like I got to find something else, and that's what he did.
Marvin is a wealthy man. He owns an extremely successful contracting business.
He ran for mayor for a number of reasons. My dad was a leader, and that's what he always stressed all our life, be a leader.
Even though Marvin hadn't been the mayor for 20 years, everybody called him the mayor. Marvin was a force of nature in that small town.
A lot of people, when you walk into someplace, they go, hey, Mayor, just messing with him.
I know this has been extremely distressing for all of you, but I do need to speak to Mrs. Brown.
Aller is also aware that Marvin Brown has a second wife. The new wife's name is Deborah, who he's been married to for 10 years.
He absolutely loved Deb. Always a happy marriage.
Deborah works with Marvin in the business. She is his bookkeeper. She's responsible for the payment of bills and payroll and that sort of thing. Marvin and Deborah are partners in business as well as in life. They make a great team. She has a daughter. Her daughter's name is Meredith, and this daughter is pregnant. Meredith is not Marvin Brown's child. She's his stepchild, but he treats her as if she is his own.
Dad loved all his stepchildren, and he was especially close to Meredith because she was youngest.
I mean, it was a pretty stressful night. Deborah Brown had taken her daughter, Meredith, to the hospital because of the problems with her pregnancy.
So the sons are there, but mom and daughter are not. Marvin Brown's stepdaughter, Meredith, is having pregnancy issues, probably as a result of this shocking murder. So her mother has decided to take her to the hospital to be evaluated.
Can you walk me through where you've been today?
The first idea is to establish alibis. What was everybody doing the day Marvin died? So they determined that the sons are all at work. Deborah and her daughter Meredith are shopping for baby furniture for the new arrival. They have no opportunity to commit the offense.
Thank you.
Aller's task is to have this crime scene speak to him in some way and tell him what can be learned.
The way we viewed everything on scene, it was pretty apparent that somebody had snuck up on this victim.
You immediately begin looking at the individual who made the call, and that's Pete Anderson.
The 911 caller was a friend of Marvin's. A lot of times, it turns out, the people that called 911 had something to do with the death.
He was in from out of town. It was just very odd that he was there during this instance.
What are you doing here, Pete Anderson? How long have you been here? Did you kill and then make the call as if you discovered him? That's entirely possible. Pete Anderson is now in an interrogation room at the police department, as he is the one who is present when the police arrive with Marvin Brown dead on the floor in front of them.
We just want to make sure you're not involved in his death in any way.
Sure, I understand.
This person supplied us with their movements and receipts, and through ATM cameras, we proved 100% he definitely was not anywhere near Belmont County when Marvin was shot. We were able to rule him out as a suspect almost immediately.
In homicide investigations, the expression is you run the wickets. You do what is obvious first, and what is next obvious next, and so on. And that's what they've done with Pete Anderson.
All right, thank you for your time.
So the next step is for Rusty and Aller to go to the coroner and have him tell them about this gunshot wound.
Mr. Brown was shot through the upper to mid portion of the right back. Without some kind of contraption set up to hold a gun and shoot himself, it's almost impossible for this to be a suicide. He didn't have what we call defense wounds on the hands and forearms, so it appears that he was not involved in an assault or a fight situation, and that he was quite surprised from behind.
The shooter took advantage of the situation. He's there to kill Marvin Brown, and rather than confront him, he just shoots him in the back.
Mr. Brown was in very good health for his age. His heart was normal shape and size. I would have expected him to live another decade or two if this trauma did not happen to him.
The day after Marvin was killed, I was just interviewing family and friends all day long. We interviewed Deborah Brown, Marvin's wife.
Then he took that opportunity to ask a few more questions.
Can you think of anyone that might have had a grudge against Marvin?
Marvin is widely known as someone not to be trifled with. He has a long history, and long histories can come back to haunt you.
There was this one thing that happened a few weeks ago, but we didn't think anything about it at the time.
One of the things we were told by Deb was that Marvin had had a crossbow stolen from his cabin.
Deborah recalls that there's a guy named Rex Jocelyn who apparently had stolen a crossbow that Marvin used for hunting.
Marvin went out, and when he came back, he had the crossbow. But he never told us what had happened.
So she assumed that they had a confrontation of some sort. Is that enough to kill for her? What if his manhood was insulted because he got his ass handed to him by a 72-year-old man? That certainly would do it, now wouldn't it?
When we learned about this crossbow being stolen, we definitely had a possible motive for Marvin's death. It was the best one we had.
So we need to have a conversation with Mr. Jocelyn and find out where he acquired his taste in crossbows.
I'm Detective Aller with the Belmont County Sheriff's Office.
We'd like to ask you a few questions.
I was able to get a timeline for the whole day and confirm with this person's foreman and prove that they were nowhere near when Marvin was killed.
The frustrating thing about homicide investigation is 90% of the time, you're pursuing things that turn out to be nothing. You still have to run the wickets. Several more weeks pass, and Chief Investigator Aller is in the same boat he's been in. He's eliminated 2 suspects. He's established a solid alibi for all 5 of the current family members, and he doesn't have a hell of a lot else.
Tell you what, on this case, from day one, this is definitely going to be a long haul. And you're like, oh, this ain't going to be good.
In Powhatan, people would look right at me and say, I hope they get who did this. This left a void in Powhatan.
Pretty much right off the bat, Marvin's sons, they wanted to help. One of the things that they talked about was, should we post a reward?
And he said, if we dry up, let's do it then.
It's not something that we in law enforcement recommend right off the get-go.
Money complicates everything, and it complicates the truthfulness of humans. People will say anything to get their hands on money. They will point the finger at their own mother.
But enough time had passed. I said, I think now's the time to go forward with your guys' idea of putting a reward out.
I think we started off at $10,000 and we ended up raising it to $50,000 by the end.
$50,000 is a lot of money for anybody, let alone somebody in Powhatan Point. Aller's phones light up in headquarters. Everybody and his brother calls in, who absolutely knows who's responsible for this case, for killing Cock Robin and starting the Second World War, if they will just give them the 50 grand. It's been weeks, and Aller has nothing of substance. And there is no worse feeling in the world.
There's a crippling little voice in the back of my head saying it's never going to close.
He is feeling the fear that creeps in of not solving something. I've had that fear. It's horrible. You don't sleep. You are consumed by it. Aller is wading through this mess of people, But he finds one. And it's interesting when you find one like this. You just feel it in your bones. A woman calls. The woman's name is Hattie Connor. She reports that she is friends with Meredith.
Hattie Connor gave us our first real break on this case.
Meredith called her and asked her to do her a favor. Marvin's accountant wanted to speak to Marvin suddenly about a concern he had about missing funds from the bank accounts. And Meredith wanted her friend Hattie to call Marvin Brown and pretend to be from the accountant's office so that that meeting could be postponed. Well, how would Meredith know that Marvin's accountant was trying to get a hold of him in the first place? Because Meredith's mother, Deborah, is Marvin Brown's bookkeeper.
Meredith said that her mother needed some time to deal with something.
So, she wanted you to call Marvin Brown and pretend you're from the accountant's office?
Eddie Connor says her mother was in the room, and Mom said, that doesn't sound right. And so she didn't. She never did make that call.
We had to ask ourselves, how much is Meredith involved in all this?
And Aller said, oh my, Eddie, your mother was right. Thank you very much. The old expression applies. When in doubt, follow the money, and it will lead you to the truth.
Thank you.
So Aller is finally getting somewhere. He's got something to chew on. Doesn't prove anything, but it certainly puts him in the ballpark.
As far as looking at the finances of Marvin's company, if you're trying to get a person to pretend to be an accountant, to dismiss an appointment, to keep the owner of the company away from something, this guy just got murdered.
Why would Meredith want to stop this meeting? Is she somehow involved in all of this? That's the question. The answer is to start following Meredith around. So they put an undercover cop on her tail.
Our investigation showed that Meredith had a drug habit. She had a very large pill problem. She was involved with multiple people that were known drug dealers.
So now this cop starts asking questions around town about sweet little Meredith.
At the time, Meredith was an attractive girl.
People were telling us that she used drugs and she manipulated men through sex for drugs and money. No one had anything good to say about Meredith. Everything we learned about her was more suspicious as time went on.
Aller knows he's onto something, but he's not exactly sure what. Meredith had been shopping for baby furniture the whole time and has an ironclad alibi for the moment the murder happened. What he does know is that Meredith is living far from an average life, and she has a habit that she needs to feed. Not only that, but he knows that she tried to trick Marvin into missing a meeting with an accountant. But the question is, why would Meredith want Marvin dead?
The next step was to learn more about the financial stuff. We identified Marvin's accountant and reached out to that person. We learned that finances were not good. The money was screwed up. Deb had not filed a tax return for several years.
So what are you up to, Deborah?
Thank you very much for your time.
Through search warrants and court orders, we obtained all the financial records from Marvin and Deb's bank accounts. There was a probate hearing where Deb was ordered to turn over the accounting records that she was in charge of. I was given those, and I'm looking, I'm like, whoa, wow. Whoa, I mean, it was, to a lay person like myself, no problem seeing that these are two different sets of books. The books that she turned in, they were fake.
Aller looks at withdrawals made by Deborah from ATM machines in cash, thousands upon thousands of dollars. When you're a homicide detective, you have to become a priest, a marriage counselor, a psychiatrist. One of the things he's had to become is an amateur accountant. Deborah is covered in a cloud of suspicion. So then the question becomes, all right, Deborah, let's say you're a thief. So where's the money?
Deb doesn't appear to be someone that's living large. You're someone that's stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're driving a brand new car, fancy vacations, things like that.
The subject's on the move. I'm following.
What are you up to, Deborah? What exactly do you need the money for? Now it becomes more than a pursuit of the money. It becomes a pursuit of what you did with it.
In talking to different confidential informants in the Powhatan area, we learned not only Meredith had a bad prescription pill problem, Deborah did as well.
And when we come to find out, Deb's putting down $500 to $700 a day for pills for her and Meredith.
Both Deborah and Meredith are drug users. That's where the money goes. It goes to narcotics, as it always does. People think they're magic. They are black magic.
On top of that, she's got a huge gambling problem. So she's popping pills, spending this money all day long. When she's out of it, she goes out to the ATM and takes $500, $700 out all day, every day. If you look at a withdrawal for, let's say, $500 from an ATM right next to her favorite gambling parlor, I mean, she literally deleted that transaction from the books that she had turned into the court.
The most dangerous machine in the casino is the ATM. Deborah's taking $500 hits in the ATM machine that's located across the street from her favorite casino. How convenient. In light of this new information, things appear a little different. The detectives begin to reassess the behavior of the widow, starting with the day of the murder.
I remember that day. One thing that stood out is Deb kind of just took off. We had learned that Meredith was having some pregnancy issues. I thought it was very weird. There were multiple other family members that could have took her. This is her husband laying murdered. She just kind of takes off.
So now Aller develops a new theory of the case. Mom and daughter have a great alibi, but they have the right companions, ones that will kill for money. 6 months since this investigation gets underway. So now we know that this mother-daughter team, Marvin Brown's wife and stepdaughter, had been robbing him blind for years, and they were about to be found out. If Marvin discovers their thievery, their life is going to change dramatically for the worse. Well, they can't have that. They have a good alibi, but they certainly know the right people. Perhaps one of them would take care of this problem by removing Marvin Brown from the planet.
Here's Deb. She's stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars. She's about to get found out. And then this guy ends up dead 2 weeks later. We didn't have enough to charge Deb with a murder at this point. But she's stealing money, she's making fake books. So we applied and got a search warrant for Deb's house. You never know what you're gonna come across in these types of searches. We found something very interesting.
Mrs. Brown, we'd like to take a look inside the safe.
It was in a gun safe. Deb had the combination to it. We found a box for a compact 9mm pistol.
Ms. Brown, do you have any idea where the gun is for this box?
Where is the gun, Deborah? I don't know. I haven't seen it since my husband bought it. Now, is it possible that Deborah's lying? No, that's the question.
And it had the serial number of the pistol on it. And we were able to trace that back and find out who sold it. This gentleman, he actually remembered the transaction, and he's pretty sure that Marvin said that he bought it for his wife. No one ever known him to own a 9mm. So finding out that he bought one and that his wife had access to it and it's missing was a huge for us.
Now he has a set of cooked books. He has an empty gun box of the correct weapon, made by the correct company. And all fingers point at Deborah Brown.
She was, at that point, interviewed about the financial crimes. She knew we had her cold for all the financial stuff, so she admitted to taking the money for the drugs and the gambling and whatnot and hiding it from Marvin. But she held fast on not knowing anything about the murder. We could tie her to the embezzlement, but to put her directly into murder in a court of law, we weren't there yet.
Stand up. Deborah Brown, I am arresting you on suspicion of fraud.
Aller is absolutely convinced that Deb and her daughter Meredith are the masterminds behind this death. But Aller can't prove it. He can't put a gun in their hand. He can't put them at the scene. He has no evidence to support it. So Aller decides the best pathway to that information is to start arresting the associates of Deborah and Meredith for sale and transactions in narcotics to see what they can tell him.
We descended upon all criminal associates of Deb and Meredith we could think of. We squeezed them hard. And we ended up busting several of Meredith's drug dealer boyfriends for trafficking drugs. We want information. We want help.
They arrest a number of these people, but they tell them nothing. But there's one guy whose name keeps coming up again and again, and his name is Stephen Moore.
You should talk to Stephen Moore. That guy hangs around Meredith all the time.
Stephen Moore's a resident of Powhatan. He's well known in the sheriff's office, extremely long criminal history for theft and drug offenses. Moore had been involved with Meredith for several years. We definitely started looking at Moore for being involved in this homicide. This whole operation was our last shot, and we had to do it just right.
Hey, what's up, man?
An officer spent about a year working on this and was finally able to get into Stephen's circle and started purchasing drugs on a fairly regular basis off Stephen. But finally, we executed a search warrant at Stephen's house. And right then and there, I told him, "You're done solid on this drug case, and I want to talk to you about Marvin Brown."
Tell me what happened, Stephen.
Okay, so here's the hell up. I want to help you out.
Stephen said, "Hey, yeah, I do. I do want to talk." And at first, I'm like, I just can't believe, because the whole time on this case, I'm like the dog that gets kicked. But finally, it's starting to happen.
Stephen is surrounded by demons. Stephen has to stop feeling this way. If you don't kill every day, the guilt eats at you. You begin to see the victim in people's faces. You begin to see all sorts of demons come out of the darkness because you're a murderer.
I need help. I need help to get to the people that put this into motion. I knew you killed Marvin. I want you to tell me the truth.
Marvin noticed that there was something, and he had an appointment with the accountant, and there was money that wasn't there or something. And he found out about it, and he was supposed to, I don't know. That's why she wanted somebody to cancel the appointment. Reschedule it.
Reschedule? Why did she want to reschedule it? Did she tell you?
And to give them more time to get what they wanted to do.
Which was what?
I guess to have him taken care of.
Right off the bat, Stephen was talking about the accountant. Stephen said Meredith planned to have the accountant called by someone else to give Meredith and Deb time to plan the murder of Marvin.
Their mom would pay somebody if they could get rid of this. And
get rid of what?
Him. Kill him? Yeah.
And then As she's telling me everything, all this guilty knowledge starts leaking out.
But I know you had a weapon. What kind of weapon did you have?
I think it was a high point.
A high
9mm.
So who gave you that gun?
Meredith.
You got a guy and you're telling you're screwed unless you cooperate with me. That could still be viewed as you're making someone tell you what you want to hear. You don't want that in an interrogation room. You want the truth. So there's lots of things we build into these interviews to make sure that the person that's confessing to us has guilty knowledge.
Stephen lays this out chapter and verse. He matches every fact of the crime scene, including a weapon, all the right things. It's him, without doubt.
You're not a killer. I know killers. You're not one of them. You did this. And it wasn't you. Someone made you do this. Don't let her win, Stephen. Tell me what happened. You shot Marvin Brown. Stephen, who shot Marvin Brown?
Me.
And eventually, he owed up the fact that he was the one that shot Marvin.
Stephen tells Aller that Deborah gave him $12,000 to kill Marvin Brown.
You call me when it's done.
He was given a high point 9mm, the same model that's missing from Marvin's house, that we never released to a soul. It was slapped in his hand by Deb and Meredith, along with a bag of pills and $2,000 down. Kill Marvin, and then we'll give you another $10,000.
Stephen tells Aller in his confession that Meredith told him when he should be at the cabin because she had set up her alibi to be furniture shopping for the baby. Stephen was in the cabin before Brown arrived.
Where were you?
Over here under a blanket.
It was hiding under a blanket next to the bed.
Back to the crime scene. Right next to that bed was a blanket, just like he said. No one knew that. No one knew that. But you had to been at that crime scene. And I'm at this point, I'm just like, oh, tell me more, Stephen, tell me more. And I walked up behind him and I shot him right in the back. I saw a bullet, I picked up the bullet, and I left. I said, why did you take the shell casing? He says, I didn't see it.
Stephen the genius says, I didn't see it. Oh, okay. I forgot you're a moron, Stephen. That's probably my fault.
Stand up for me, please. Stop right there. Place your arms behind your back.
So Aller now has what he needs, a detailed confession of how this crime occurred, and it was planned by Deborah and Meredith. That certainly should do it, but somehow, maybe it's just not going to.
It was 5 years before it came to a conclusion. The prosecutor and the assistant prosecutor who ran this case wanted to be very cautious.
When you are asking a jury to believe a witness, you must be able to convince a jury that this person is credible, that their information is reliable, and they certainly can't do that with Stephen Moore.
Stephen Moore's stories begin to change on such a level that using him as a witness was not ever going to be possible in a court of law.
Stephen is an unreliable witness. He does not have a specific way to prove he ever received $12,000 from anyone. So in the opinion of the district attorney, none of that adds up to clear and convincing. March 20th, 2015, Deborah Brown pleads guilty to theft and tampering with evidence. She serves 3 years in prison for these crimes. She's released, and a few months later, she dies of cancer and has to answer to a higher authority. And exactly 3 years later, March the 19th of 2018, Meredith is arrested.
But we were able to get an arrest warrant for Meredith based off of Stephen's confession. At that point, she had moved. She was in West Virginia. We had to supply West Virginia with the warrant affidavit. Somehow, my affidavit ended up in the hands of a local news media. When it became public record and was on the 5 o'clock news, it's ruined. Meredith was indicted for other crimes. She was not indicted for the homicide.
Meredith was convicted of obstruction of justice and is sentenced to 2 years home confinement. Neither woman was charged with murder. Stephen, on the other hand, decides to plead guilty to first-degree murder in the death of Marvin Brown. He is sentenced to life in prison plus 17 years in the state of Ohio, where he remains today.
Well, I lost hundreds of hours of sleep over this case. From 2013 to 2018, it's an eternity to work a murder case.
I think people still feel that not everyone who had a hand in it has been brought to justice.
Just a disappointment of Deborah and Meredith getting away. I would gladly let Stephen walk away to watch them two go to prison the rest of their life.
There's so many things that, both of our, Chris and myself and my brother Mike, I mean, our kids have done a lot to be proud of, and my dad would have. Yeah, sorry.
Aller didn't get all that he wanted. You stay on a case after a million dead ends because you took an oath to be the voice of someone whose voice has been silenced. That's what you said you'd do. And if you said it, you better have meant it. Everybody I know meant it.
The call comes in after midnight, and it sounds like the city holding its breath. A cul-de-sac near the river, a Chevy that never made it home. Headlights still on, doors locked, windows fogged from the inside as if someone had been breathing hard and then vanished into the damp. The first officer writes the date and underlines it once, July. Heat pressed low over the roofs. Dogs awake in their yards. Somewhere a train blares and keeps going. The story begins like a headline you do not want to read again. Missing woman. Last seen leaving a closing shift. 23 years old. A ring in her pocket. A voicemail never checked. A walk across a parking lot that looks ordinary in daylight and predatory at 2 a.m. Cold case. It starts here. They tape the scene and it looks small because all crime scenes are small when you are standing inside them. A rectangle of asphalt, a smear on the door handle that could be sweat or rain or fear, a receipt crumpled under the seat that proves only that she stopped for gas. The detective sent out his Newtonites. He has a baby at home and a coffee that tastes like pennies. He inventory checks everything and knows nothing matters yet. Not the half-empty water bottle, not the scent of someone else in the passenger seat that might be a ghost, or might be the last person to see her alive. Neighbors lean on fences, reporters test how close they can get. The sky goes dull gray. The city wakes and forgets and remembers. Missing person, the kind that starts as a search and becomes a prayer that wears out its knees. Her name runs on air for a week. A photograph airs and airs again. The smile is bright and earnest in the way people are when they think they have time. She had a calendar on the fridge with a red circle around Friday. She had a cat that keeps pawing the door. She had a mother who will not sleep because sleep feels like betrayal. Police pull the river. They walk the embankments. They ask the same questions until the vowel sounds go raw. Who saw her? Who heard anything? Who noticed a car not from here? A man from the apartment complex remembers a shape moving behind the dumpster. He cannot say what kind. Sounded like a hurried thing. That is all. Another person says headlights flash twice as if signaling. Memory is a tricky accomplice. It gives and takes. The files get thicker. The nights get longer. The city learns the next part of the script. Flyers on telephone poles, candles in glass, voices that shake, watchful eyes at bus stops, patrol cars idle a little longer at the corner near the diner where she worked, co-workers share shifts, they swap theories that taste like tin. The boyfriend cries on the news and the comments go cruel. The mother pleads on a weekday morning show and ratings spike. A local talk radio host decides the case is a mirror for the whole city, and the phone lines stay jammed for hours with people certain they know what happened. The detective stops listening. He sits in his car outside the cul-de-sac after midnight and stares at the place where the sedan sat and feels the weight that never leaves. The weight is called time. Weeks drag like anchors. The department rotates people through the detail. Someone finds a single earring in a storm drain 2 blocks from the lot. It is not hers. Someone turns in a wallet by the river. It is not hers. Someone remembers a white van with a dent above the wheel well, and this corrupts a whole month of tips. White vans multiply. Every third vehicle looks guilty. Patrols pull them over. One belongs to a pest control company. One belongs to a band that swears it drives through nights just like this to play crowded basements. The detective writes the plate numbers until his fingers cramp. He stops carrying hope in his breast pocket because it gets wrinkled and ugly and heavy. Autumn arrives and surprises no one. Leaves curl. Rain returns. The cat sits at the window as if monitoring the street for a parade that refuses to march. The family holds a vigil and the crowd is too big for the hall. Someone plays a home video on a wheeled television. A birth cake with too many candles blown in one breath. Laughter that spills. The detective steps outside and hears it continue from the open door and understands the cruelty of evidence you can only watch. He thinks of his daughter. He thinks of how a city eats the noise of a disappearance and burps up rumors. He begins to dream in headlines. Manhunt continues. No signs. Search scaled back. Community shocked. He hates the word community. He hates the word shocked. The file goes cold slowly at first, and then all at once, a winter of silence settles over every lead. The mother learns to leave a porch light on forever. The boyfriend moves, but not far. He cannot leave the map of streets that hold his last hours with her. The detective gets promoted and his shoulders hunch more. He is not old, but the case gives him old. He keeps a folder on his desk he calls the river because everything wants to flow into it. He adds notes on anniversaries. He adds a strip of photos a patrol officer took of the lot in winter. Fresh snow, no tracks. Clean white that insults the memory of that night. The city changes, buildings go up, storefronts get new paint. The dumpster behind the lot is replaced with one that does not rattle in the wind. No one remembers that detail except the detective and the janitor who signed for the replacement on a rainy Thursday. Years pass and nobody calls them years in the home, where the mother keeps the room ready. They are just another night where the bed is made and the closet door stays open as a promise to the air. A volunteer group takes up the case on weekends. They fan out with digital flyers and dogged hearts. A podcast host records a trailer with a voice that trembles on purpose. Episode 1 runs. The download count climbs. Strangers begin to own the story. The detective hates it. Then he listens. Then he hears something inside the sound design that is just plain careful attention, and he softens against his will. The host interviews the old apartment manager who could not be found in the original canvas. He drinks tea that looks like old coins and says a man parked badly in the lot that night. The wheels were left turned toward the curb. It had a habit, he says, of rolling a little after the engine cut. He remembers a key fob with a crack through the plastic. A detail slips like a fish. He grabs it. Green sweater, no jacket. There was a fixed armrest. The detective writes all of it down because new eyes sometimes borrow back what fatigue pawned. A new lab tech joins the state crime lab. She is quick and exacting and suspicious of despair. She reopens boxes that smell like dust and something sweet you cannot name. She replaces brushes. She runs a swab on the seatbelt tongue no one thought to test when testing meant bigger samples. There it is. Not much. Not enough for the old machine. Enough for the new one. A whisper of skin from a hand that clicked a buckle and did not belong to the owner of the car. The name is not a name yet. It is a tiny map with markers. 13 loci. Then more. The tech calls the detective and hears the slow exhalation of a man who has been waiting to hear a future arrive. Genealogy comes like a rumor and then like a storm. Family trees branch across screens. Volunteers who treat Saturdays like a chessboard place, knights and bishops across decades. A cluster in Idaho. A branch in eastern Oregon. A cousin who took a holiday DNA test because a nephew bought it on sale. A match at the distance of a whisper. Then another. They do not say the name yet. They draw a circle around it. The detective drives roads he has not driven, looks at houses he never thought to know, sits in a coffee shop and studies the door to see if the past will push it open. The past obliges. A man comes in with a limp you would not notice unless you were trained to watch. He orders black coffee. He takes the table in the corner and sets his keys down with the fob cracked through the plastic. It has been decades since anyone looked close at this face. It blends by design. It is forgettable the way a discarded wrapper is forgettable until it lands on your porch. The detective does not stand. He watches the hands. He watches the way the man looks through glass as if checking for reflections that might be chasing him. Surveillance blooms. Men in unmarked cars learn a new neighborhood by heart. Garbage day yields a coffee cup. The lab tech carries it like a relic and waits for the machine to speak. It speaks in numbers and confidence intervals that make throats go dry. The detective stares at the report. He thinks of the parking lot. He thinks of the river. He thinks of the mother and the cat that must be gone by now, or perhaps lives on in a form made of legend and loyalty. He signs the paperwork for a warrant. There is nothing heroic about it. The pen squeaks. He blinks. He goes home and washes his hands like a ritual. He does not sleep. The door comes down with the practiced violence of people who wish they did not know how. Inside the living room there is a shelf of old maps and a set of coins in plastic sleeves. There is a chair with a fixed armrest. There is the smell of lemon cleaner. The man once young is now a man with hair gone thin and eyes that do not show surprise because he has rehearsed this moment more times than he admits to himself. He says nothing first. He looks at the window. He looks at the floor. He looks at the detective like the detective is the one that vanished. The cuffs click. The neighbors gather. Somewhere a dog barks at the shattering of routine. Headline shape. Arrest shocks community. It writes itself and also refuses to write because the ending is never the ending when a body is still a question. Interview rooms are built for the slow erosion of a person. The lights are honest and tired. The table legs wobble. The detective sits. The man sits. A tape recorder turns the air into evidence. Questions arrive low and steady. Where were you? Why that night? How did you pick her? Silence plants seeds. Anger waters them. Then a sentence that opens like a trap door. She left her car. I offered to help. Words stack. He explains the passenger seat like a real estate agent selling a bad house. She was scared. I calmed her. He outlines a route that intersects the lot and the river and the cul-de-sac like a constellation no one wanted to see. He speaks in a voice that sounds harmless at first and then grows teeth. The detective breathes through his nose and writes less and less because the tape now owns this. A lawyer arrives, the mouth closes, the room goes back to a hum. The detective stands and counts to 10 and fails to feel anything like triumph. The mother is told in the afternoon because that is when the body can absorb only so much. She sits on a couch that sags from years of grief. The detective says the name like it hurts. She nods once. She asks for details and does not ask for others. She asks about the car. She asks about the lot. She asks if her daughter was afraid. The detective lies as gently as a blanket. He says what he has to say. She looks past him toward the kitchen where the calendar still hangs. He has to look. He owes her that much. The red circles march on in months that never came. She thanks him as if he delivered a parcel late and in good condition. He wants to apologize to a calendar, to a cat, to a year. She walks him to the door and puts her palm flat on his sleeve like a blessing you give a stranger. Court comes heavy with cameras. Old photographs flash on screens above jurors who did not ask for this wait. The prosecutor speaks like a metronome. The defense speaks like erosion. Evidence is a litany. Seatbelt tongue, key fob. Fibers that chose the wrong vehicle to cling to for decades. Genealogy that turns out not to be a parlor trick but a net. Witnesses who tremble but remember. The man on the stand looks like a house with the lights out. The city watches itself watch him. The verdict arrives on a Thursday that smells like rain. Guilty. The word steps into the room and sits down and refuses to move. The mother does not cry in public. She holds a photograph and looks at it and looks through it and looks past it to a river that took and did not return. The lot is a grocery store now. Families push carts through the place where the Chevy idled under old lights. No plaque marks the spot. The detective parks on the far side and does not go in. He sits and counts the breaths he owes to the people whose names are in his drawer, and he wonders what it means to call a case solved when so much remains gone. He recites the headline in his head because it is easier than prayer. Portland, 1997, cold case solved. He says it in a steady voice. He waits for it to feel like relief. It does not. It feels like a door that is finally closed and still thumps when the wind picks up. The verdict echoes, then dissolves into the grinding hum of the courthouse HVAC, the scrape of chairs, the clustered whispers that bloom when people feel safe to speak again, and it should feel like an ending. It should close like a book slapped shut, but it does not. It settles like fog, slow, invasive, patient, and everyone who carried the weight for years suddenly does not know where to put their hands. The detective steps into the hallway and finds the mother halfway down the corridor, the photograph of her daughter folded once, then unfolded, the crease like a scar across a smile that should have been left unbroken, and he tells her the sentencing date, the formalities, the motions the defense will file that will clang and clatter for a while, then fall quiet, and she nods the way people nod when they are inside a storm and pretending to listen to the weather report. Cameras push forward, microphones tilt, voices ask the same question with a dozen accents, how do you feel? And the detective bars a path with his shoulder and feels the old ache flare, the ache that started in a cul-de-sac with headlights that refused to blink. The man who made all this gravity shuffles in cuffs toward a door marked with the cheap paint of county budgets, and for a second his eyes skim the hallway glass and catch himself, a small, startled animal surprised by a trap it set for others, and the detective catalogs that image and puts it where he keeps everything he cannot throw away. Outside the courthouse, the day is bright and embarrassingly cheerful, a sky with no shame, a breeze that moves the flags like applause, and the city tries on the headline like a suit, checking the fit in every storefront window. Portland, 1997, cold case solved. It is a sentence that tastes like justice and still leaves grit on the tongue. At a bakery 2 blocks over, a barista speaks the line out loud to the next in queue, the words floating above croissants and a chalkboard that cannot keep up with the morning rush. At a bus stop, an old man recites the name of the street where the car was found and gets it wrong, then corrects himself and feels better, as if accuracy were a prayer. In a kitchen that smells like dinner even at noon, the mother turns off every radio in the house because voices reached their limit years ago. She walks the length of the hall and stops in the doorway of the room that is the same and not the same because time has 2 hands, one that takes and one that preserves, and this room received both. The detective drives home by a route that bends past the river because he cannot not look at water, not anymore. He watches sunlight grin off the surface and thinks about how evidence is a stubborn thing that still behaves like weather, seasonal, moody, sometimes generous, sometimes cruel. He thinks of the lab tech who found the whisper on the seatbelt tongue, how she stood by the machine and willed a future into being with repetition and rigor, how she went home that night and sat in her kitchen and shook, not from fear, from the sudden collapse of a long-held breath. He thinks of genealogy, how it walked in like a rumor, left like a hurricane, how a cheap test kit bought in a late holiday sale turned the air in an interview room into confession. He plays the tape again in his mind, that tone, that cadence, that patient cruelty packed into ordinary words, and he feels the urge to drive until the road runs out and the atlas folds itself closed. The man waits in county, a room with a light that hums and a bed you do not sleep on so much as endure. He has the look of someone who treated invisibility like a craft, practiced it, sharpened it, wore it like a jacket with the armrest fixed so the elbow never drops, and now invisibility has holes, stitched shut with chain and key and court dates that come like a metronome. He calls no one. He receives no one. A public defender sits and speaks in terms of appeals, motions to suppress the genealogical tree as fruit of a poisoned root, and he nods because nodding is what people do when time turns to tide and pulls without asking. In the discovery packet, there is a photograph of a key fob with a crack through it, the same crack the detective saw on a table in a coffee shop. And this small object becomes a character in a story, a minor figure that changed acts with a simple entrance. The podcast host watches the courthouse footage, scrubs through it, listens to the ambient noise, the soft clicks, the throat clearings, the hallway cough, and shapes a new episode intro that does not gloat, because the show learned humility while tripping through the bones of strangers' grief. He drives back to the lot where the sedan had once idled and sets a recorder on the curb and captures the sound of shopping carts, a child singing to no one, the shudder of a delivery truck, and interleaves those layers under his narration, because endings are only beginnings in new shoes. He interviews the lab tech not for the thrill but for the method, the steady insisting on clean surfaces, the meticulous chain of custody that kept hope from corroding into circus. He interviews the detective in a park where gulls heckle from lampposts and the detective answers plainly, the way men speak who buried their taste for drama under paperwork and discipline. And his voice breaks one time, not at the word guilty, but at the word porch. The mother meets the detective at a coffee shop with a door that sticks on rainy mornings. And today it sticks, a petty obstacle that gives her a task, a thing to overcome, and she smiles politely at the door, like at a stubborn child, then pushes through. They sit at the window, and she asks the question that kept her lungs small for so long, will I ever know where? And the detective says maybe. He says it like a rope lowered into a well because they still have ground to search, a piece of riverbank that gave up a scrap of cloth once and might give again, a backyard that the man rented 10 years after the night and left filled with turned earth in 2 odd rectangles, a short drive from a place where streetlights go sparse and coyotes cry like alarms. She nods and sips, and the steam fogs the glass like the windows of the Chevy all those years ago, and neither mentions that image, because they do not need to. The squad goes back to the map, pins get replaced, lines redraw, old reports are reopened, and the pages complain with that brittle sound that paper makes when it has listened too long. A detective who was still in school in 1997 brings the drone, quiet, hovering, eyes that do not get tired, and they fly it over the rental yard. The camera seeing a garden the bare eye would miss. The faint patterns that heavy work leaves when weight meets soil and time tries to erase. Ground-penetrating radar arrives on a trailer. Boots crunch gravel. The machine hums and purrs and speaks in cross-sections and anomalies and shapes that suggest voids where there should be none. The team unrolls caution tape in a rectangle that looks like it was drawn by a memory, and work begins. Shovels go in, dirt comes up, it smells like old rain, it smells like stubborn history. Everyone breathes through it. They find buttons first, small, plastic, nothing a headline would respect, yet everyone moves closer, a halo around a patch of earth that does not know it is a stage. Then a zipper pull, corroded to the color of regret, stamped with a brand the detective remembers from a receipt in a glove compartment. Then bone, and everything slows, then stops, because that word means ritual. The tech kneels in a way that is both scientific and reverent, gloved hands careful, voice low, calling each item as if it were a name. It is not a full skeleton, not at first. It is a scatter, the way water rearranges, the way shovels changed the story a decade after the original act. The detective stands back and does the math in his chest, the years, the distance from the lot, the way a man built a life over a room he never cleaned. The mother is not called yet, not until the lab can speak, because grief has rules, even if they are made up by the people who broke under them. The defense files its paperwork and fills it with words like taint and breach, questioning the family tree as if it were a trespasser in the Garden of Rights. And the prosecutor answers with chain of custody and independent confirmation and a coffee cup that the defendant threw away in a public can because routine rules people until the second it does not. The courtroom becomes a classroom with one lesson repeated from different angles: privacy and public safety. The old balance beam laid out in front of a jury that is learning law while carrying strangers' lives on their laps. Outside, opinion blooms like clover, thick everywhere, impossible to mow. The talk show host, who turned the case into a mirror, returns and lectures into a camera about slippery slopes, about knock-on effects. While in the lab, a woman who counts base pairs in rows and columns keeps her head low and her concentration high. Because what actually matters is not a slope, it is a body. It is a name that either returns to a home or does not. The detective's daughter is in high school now, her backpack a mess of pens and wrappers and sheet music, and he watches her practice for a recital with a seriousness that makes him want to build a fence around the whole calendar. She asks about the case only once, over dishes, water running, cups clinking, her voice soft. Did you find her? And he says, not yet, and yes, and we think so, and maybe, all at once, which is the only honest way to answer. She nods and dries a plate and sets it on the rack with care, and he sees both the child who once clapped at rainbows on the wall and the person who will one day walk into nights that make fathers pray. He tells her to call if she needs anything, and she says she always does, and neither mentions the way he checks the porch light twice, sometimes 3 times, because rituals are anchors disguised as habits. A neighbor steps forward, belated courage sparked by a verdict, and tells a story about a night in 2001 when the man now waiting in county came home late and carried a bundle to the shed, a weight that bent his back, a canvas tarp wrapped around angles that did not look like garden tools, and the neighbor says he told himself it was none of his business, then says he thinks of that moment each time he sees the mother's face on the news, and guilt goes off in the room like a smoke alarm. The detective listens without scolding, because time already punished silence more than any lecture could, and he takes the statement and adds it to the river, that folder, that tide of paper that is now both a monument and a map. In the garage of the house where the man once lived, they find a box of maps, trail lines marked in pencil, a private atlas of alt routes and lookout points, and the detective traces one with a finger and feels a response in the gut, a tug that says go now, and they follow the line to a turnout above the river where moss eats fence posts and the wind stands still in the pines. There's a scrape in the soil where a shovel once hesitated, a divot like a flinch. They work the ground with brushes first, then trowels, and bring up pieces of a world someone tried to keep under. A watch face with a crack that angles like a smile. A hair clip with enamel flowers. Soil stained darker in a shape that could be read as absence. The team tags and bags and keeps their voices down, as if noise could wake something better left sleeping. The mother comes when the call finally lands, and the detective meets her half a mile from the scene, because the scene is sacred until it says it is not. He tells her what they think, what they know, what they hope, and she listens with both hands folded around a small chain that used to hold a ring in a pocket all those years ago, the ring her daughter never got to wear. She asks if a place can be forgiven. He does not answer that. He cannot. Places are just where we put our stories, and forgiveness is a thing that lives outside jurisdiction. She asks if the river keeps secrets. He says yes, and sometimes it returns them, and sometimes it never does, and both truths can exist at once without breaking the world. At night, the detective dreams of the lot again, not the grocery carts or the neat new paint. The old lot, lights buzzed low, moths frantic, the Chevy idling, a ghost of breath on glass, and he walks to the driver door and sees himself reflected back, a man who is not new to nights anymore, a man who learned to carry weight without letting it tell him who he is. He opens the door in the dream and the seat is warm and empty, and for a second he thinks he hears a voice from the passenger side, not a scream, not a plea, a breath. In and out, the ordinary sound that is the first thing we owe each other and the last thing we miss. And he wakes with his hands open, palms stinging like he tried to catch something falling and almost did. Morning returns, as it always does, ridiculous in its optimism. The city stirs. Headlines tire and move on to the next spectacle. The podcast releases an episode called Aftermath and plays a voicemail the mother recorded at 2 a.m, a quiet thank you that makes everyone who listens sit up straighter and consider their own porch lights. In county, a man waits for the clang of a cell that is now a calendar. In the lab, a woman pipettes and watches the numbers settle. On a turnout above the river, a rectangle of ground, neat, careful, marked by flags, holds the attention of a dozen people who have learned how to make reverence out of procedure. The detective stands at the tape and watches a small wind move the grass and thinks of how stories end without ending, how solved is a word that closes a file and not a heart. They lower the flags and draw the grid and call each square by a number that sounds like a locker combination, and it should feel clinical. It should feel like the hard comfort of process. But a tremor runs under the tarps and canopies, because everyone knows a boundary line is just a mercy toward the living. The dead do not care how carefully we pace our steps. The tech in the white hood breathes slow, and names each find like an usher, a clasp, a seam fragment, a strand, and the detective does that quiet calculation again. The one you learn long before your badge opens doors, how weight becomes story, how story becomes proof, how proof becomes the small bridge you hope a mother can cross without falling apart in the gap. A thin rain needles sideways across the turnout and the hills pull it into their bark and moss. And someone jokes about getting coffee and stops halfway through the sentence because humor here needs permission and no one wants to be the person who grants it. Under the drone's low purr comes a sound like a page turned in a library, the brush moving dirt from memory to evidence. And the detective thinks of all the reading that comes after this, judges and juries and jurors' hands folded on laps while a life plays out in exhibits. And he wants, not for the first time, to grab the earth with both hands and ask it to tell the story itself, unmediated, without microphones or transcripts that mishear the heart. The lab drives out a portable scanner that bites at the soil with harmless teeth and returns a picture of underground like a thunderstorm map, blooming patches where something is, where air pockets form around shapes not made by stones, and the team shifts a foot to the left, then 3 inches back, that ballet of inches that looks like dithering to outsiders and is, in truth, respect. A zipper tooth appears, a rusted grin, then the curve of plastic that might be a snap, and the tech makes a small, involuntary noise that nobody names. Bag, label, photograph. The camera clicks in that practical rhythm that outlasts tears. The detective steps away to call the mother with an update that is not an update. We are still working, we are moving carefully, we are finding personal effects that could be consistent with what your daughter owned. And the line goes a little silent, the sound you make when a memory puts its hand on your mouth, and she says thank you in a tone that has become her profession. Back at county, the man sits in his orange and his face turns into a geography of habit, jaw working when he thinks, eyes down when he lies, the tiny flinch when someone says the river, and the public defender takes notes not because he believes in the man, belief is a tourist here, but because process is what keeps the floor from falling out under everyone. He crafts an argument around the edges, mishandled chain, rumor turned search warrant, the hazard of a podcast contaminating memory, the way a community can turn into a chorus that drowns out doubt. And in a vacuum, those words might fly, but there is no vacuum. There is a key fob with a crack, a seatbelt tongue with a whisper of skin, a coffee cup with cells that do not care about rhetoric, a life that stopped in a parking lot bathed in indifferent light. The man asks for a pencil and draws a square on the back of a form, a little room with a bed and a door without a knob, and colors it in until the paper tears. The podcast pushes its aftermath episode and then another, Anatomy of an Arrest, and the host lowers his voice the way people do when they approach sanctuaries, and he plays the sound of rain on the turnout and lets it run longer than production notes advise, because sometimes you allow the world itself to say the line. Callers leave voicemails describing their own porch lights, the way they leave them on, the way they cannot stop, and a pattern emerges across a city where grief litters the map like confetti from a parade no one wanted. The detective's inbox fills with out-of-state tips that are not tips so much as poems about loss disguised as sightings, and he reads them anyway, because words are the only flowers some people know how to bring. They dig through the afternoon into a dusk that comes early under trees this thick, and the shape that emerges is not cinematic, it is stubborn and ordinary and complicated, the way almost all truths are. A partial pelvis, a radius, the root ball of a tree that grew through what was left and gave it a second home. The detective does not allow the mother past the tape until the ME nods that the chain is tight and the scene is satisfied, and even then he thinks about turning her around. The compulsion to protect crashing against the obligation to witness. She stands with her shoulders square and her eyes set, a storm that decided to become a mountain. The ring on the chain in her hand clicks softly when she moves, and the sound travels through the cold like a code. She asks if this is the only place. The detective answers honestly, "We do not know yet." She says okay as if she is signing for a package no one wanted but everyone expected, and the detective steps back so she can look without feeling handled. Night eats the turnout, and they pack out in that practiced, reverent scramble, supplies zipped, flags counted, canvases folded, and the detective rides down in the lead car with the window cracked to taste the rain because the smell of wet cedar has become the incense that keeps him steady. He stops at a 24-hour store for batteries and buys coffee he will not drink and magazines he will not read, and stands in line behind a man buying cat litter at midnight, and the normalcy makes his throat ache. The clerk recognizes him, not personally, but as an emblem, the detective from the thing, and wants to say something helpful, and instead says the name of the victim like a prayer and hands him the change with both hands. Outside, a freight train carves the night in two, and he follows the red lights back into town, a line of jewels strung across the river's dark mouth. In the days after, the ME's office becomes another pilgrimage site for paper. The report grows bone by bone, word by word, and each sentence is a tattoo, permanent and merciless, because becomes a paragraph that leaves little room for imagination and even less room for hope. Time window tightens, not to the day, but to the night, and the detective takes his copy to the room where the first officer sat with his baby-aged coffee all those years ago, and lays the old report beside the new, and watches the pages align like continents drifting back together at their original seams. The lab tech enters and stands with her hands on the chair back as if steadying a friend, and they read in the soft, shared silence of people who know the cost of accuracy. The man's past begins to leak, as it always does once a name is stamped on the docket in a font big enough for cameras. A coworker remembers a night shift in a silence that felt artificial. A landlord from 2001 recalls a shed with a smell that did not belong to paint or oil or grass seed. A photograph surfaces from a county fair, the man in the background holding a paper cup, eyes aimed not at the camera, but at the place where the photographer's girlfriend crossed the frame. And it is not proof of anything except a gaze. And yet once you know, you know. The prosecutor decides to introduce as little of this as possible because a tight case can drown in delicious extras, and the detective agrees, surprising himself because rage wants to bring everything and discipline wants to carry only what will not drop. They go back to the lot where a grocery store now cycles through sales on apples and cereal and the private economies of families who never heard of a 1997 night on that stretch of asphalt, and the manager meets them behind the loading dock with the access codes for surveillance angles and a permission that feels like apology, as if building over hurt was a choice anyone got to make. The detective asks for the old plans and studies the depth of the footings and the distance to the storm drains and reconstructs. Not because he needs more proof, but because there is a hunger to understand routes, to see exactly how a night arranged itself into harm. He stands where the driver door would have been and looks at the sky until his neck hurts and the clouds move into letters that do not spell anything, and he hears in his head the tape recorder click on in the interview room and the defendant's quiet, almost courteous voice saying, "She left her car and I offered to help," and the detective wants to break something small, a pencil, a clip, a habit, just to make a sound that answers that obscene calm. At home, the porch light glows like a heartbeat, and the detective's daughter plays a song that wanders up the stairs and into the kitchen like a cat finding the patch of sun, and for a minute he is a man in a house in a city where work is only a word, where headlines are a thing other people read, and he lets the minute be a minute, full and untroubled, and then his phone vibrates and the moment folds itself neatly and waits on the counter like a note. The lab, mitochondrial results consistent with maternal lineage. The sentence lands with the weight of a small, perfect stone, and he texts the mother a neutral line with the proper caution, and she replies with a yes that is not approval or celebration, just acknowledgement, a semaphore from one shore to another. He steps onto the porch and checks the bulb, not because it needs checking, but because motion and light are the only spells he knows that work against the old night. Sentencing approaches like a train you can see from miles away and still pretend will stop short. The courtroom fills with faces that remember the first weeks, and faces that joined in the middle, and faces that arrived only when an answer was for sale. And the detective takes his place near the aisle where he can watch both the front and the door, habit turning into posture. The mother reads a statement that does not shake, a thin blade of gratitude and fury honed on years of air. And when she says her daughter's name, the room shifts, an almost imperceptible lean toward her, the way you lean when someone offers you something warm in winter. The man sits without posture and speaks only when the judge asks the required questions, and his voice, when it comes, is the same tone he used to order coffee, and it is that mundane sound, not the content, that makes the detective press his palm to the wood rail until his skin prints the grain. After the city exhales again, then inhales, because breathing is what cities do when they are not sure what to call the air. The podcast goes quiet for a week out of respect. The talk radio host pivots to a new scandal. The grocery store sets out pumpkins in a bright display that looks like a harvest in a painting you buy for rented walls. On the turnout above the river, new grass takes root in the rectangles. The drone sits in its case like a sleeping insect. The file, fat and solemn, moves to a shelf that says closed, where anyone who has ever worked a year in the building knows the word is a compromise. A polite sign you hang on a door that still opens at odd hours to dreams and memories and the sound of breath-fogging glass. The detective writes one last note before the appeal clock starts, a line that has no legal value and all the value he personally needs. We told the river a story, and it answered with a fragment and a prayer. The next morning opens with rain, the thin kind that blurs edges but refuses to stop, and Portland wakes under a sheet of quiet resignation. The courthouse steps are slick again, the flags limp, the sky flat as aluminum. The detective parks 2 blocks away, the habit of distance still strong, and walks past newspaper boxes that already carry his face in smaller versions, grainy and shadowed. He hates that. He always has. He never asked to be the symbol of closure, not when closure itself feels like a polite lie told to the exhausted. He passes a group of students smoking under an awning, their laughter high and nervous, the way people laugh when they realize they are standing on ground that has a story under it. They recognize him but say nothing. Respect or superstition, he cannot tell which. He walks on, coffee cooling fast in his hand, the city smelling of wet metal and something like relief trying to be born but not quite making it. Inside the courthouse, the room hums with that special silence that only courts know, the hush of performance and fatigue sharing the same air. The defendant is led in, older than his years, wrists cuffed, eyes without focus. He moves as if he is trying to remember the steps to a dance that no longer has music. The judge reads from the page, voice steady, sentencing lengths, procedural words that have no taste. and the detective watches the man's face for the smallest twitch of understanding. Nothing. Only a blink, slow, detached. The mother sits one row behind the prosecutor, her hands wrapped around the folded photograph like a promise. She does not cry. She has cried enough to flood the courthouse twice. When the final gavel hits, the sound cracks like a knuckle. Life without parole. The room exhales again, but this time no one claps. There is no victory here, only gravity settling into its proper shape. The defendant turns once, not toward her, not toward the detective, but toward the door, as if the door might offer a second chance at forgetting. Outside, the press has multiplied. Cables snake across the pavement, microphones jostle for air, and the hum of generators mixes with rain. The detective gives no statement. He has learned that words fed to cameras come back as ghosts that talk over you forever. The mother, however, stands for a moment in front of the steps, the umbrella trembling slightly in her grip. She says her daughter's name once, lets it hang there, then walks away. The reporters don't know what to do with silence. They need verbs, and she has none left to give them. The detective follows at a distance, watching her disappear into the gray, her figure merging with the weather until both seem like the same element. Days stretch thin after a verdict. Paperwork replaces adrenaline. Report drafts, evidence return logs, boxes labeled for archives. The sound of printers fills the bullpen, mechanical and indifferent. The detective's desk is a small museum, a coffee ring turned brown like a fossil, a photo of his daughter framed by thumbprints, a worn notebook that still smells faintly of river mud. He should feel finished, he tells himself, but the word refuses to land. The human brain doesn't know how to file a solved case when the crime still lives inside it. Every solved case becomes an echo chamber where the questions bounce and multiply until they sound like prayers. He closes the folder one last time, then reopens it because habits masquerade as rituals. The lab sends him a copy of the mitochondrial confirmation in a plastic sleeve. Clean type, neutral phrasing, just the facts. He reads the line 3 times. Remains consistent with maternal DNA lineage. That's the bureaucratic way to say it's her. He thinks of the mother's hands, the way they held that ring chain, and wonders if she's holding it right now, counting the links. He places the paper back, but his fingers linger on the corner as if afraid it might vanish. The lab tech passes by his desk on her way out, nodding once. She doesn't need to say anything either. The entire case has been a long education in silence. How to use it, how to bear it, how to let it speak. That night, he drives back to the turnout. No reporters now, no lights, just the low drone of insects in the river whispering its endless language. He parks where the tape once stood and steps out into the damp air. The ground is clean, reseeded, a green scar healing too fast for comfort. He walks the perimeter slowly, shoes sinking into the soft soil. Every step feels like stepping through someone's memory. The sky above is bruised purple, clouds split by faint stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the black line of trees, the defendant sits in a cell, hearing a different kind of silence, one that gnaws instead of heals. The detective kneels by the edge of the clearing and touches the earth. "We found you," he says softly, unsure whether he's speaking to the victim or to himself. A car pulls up behind him, unmarked, familiar headlights. The lab tech steps out, hood up, flashlight in hand. "You never stop, do you?" she says, voice low. "No," he replies. "Not really." She stands beside him, shining the light over the grass, careful not to blind the night. "You know they're already calling this the model case," she murmurs. "DNA, genealogy, podcasts, the whole 21st century justice story. They're teaching it at the academy." He exhales, a short laugh with no humor. "Yeah, they'll teach it," he says, "and someone will think that means we figured it all out." The flashlight beam catches a small glint, a piece of foil, nothing important, but it reminds him how small things start big storms. She pockets it anyway. They stand there a long time, the light swaying like a pendulum, the rain starting again, faint as breath. The city moves on, as cities do. The grocery store expands its parking lot. The cul-de-sac where the Chevy once sat now has a playground with soft plastic ground, the kind that absorbs falls. Children climb the new structures without knowing the story buried beneath their feet. Their laughter echoes against the nearby river wall, bright and unbothered. The mother passes by once, weeks later, holding a small bouquet of lilies. She doesn't stop at the fence. She simply walks the perimeter, head bowed, lips moving soundlessly. When she's gone, a child picks up one fallen flower and tucks it into the chain link. That night, someone posts a picture of it online, and within hours it spreads, captioned, "Closure is never silent." The detective reads that line on his phone in the dark and feels a strange calm. Maybe the internet for once got something right. He scrolls through the comments, the condolences, the theories still spinning even after the gavel, and then he sets the phone down, face first. He stands, goes to the window, looks out at the quiet street. The rain has stopped again, the air washed clean. Across the road, a neighbor's porch light glows, faint and constant, just like his own. A mirror of grief or solidarity, he isn't sure which. Maybe both. The world is full of lights people leave on for those who never made it home. He dreams of her again that night, not as a victim, not as evidence, but as motion. A woman walking across a parking lot, purse strap slipping, hair lit by a street lamp, humming something he can't name. She turns toward him, not frightened, just curious. "Did you find what you were looking for?" she asks. He tries to answer, but no sound comes out. She smiles anyway, as if she already knows. Then the dream tilts, the scene collapsing into light, and he wakes before dawn, heart steady, mind strangely empty. It's the first time in 28 years he hasn't woken with a question. At sunrise, he drives to the station one last time. The file, now sealed, sits in a banker's box marked for storage. He places it on the shelf himself, top row, alphabetized, the old-fashioned way. His hands linger there a second too long. Down the hall, someone laughs. New recruits, probably, too young to remember '97. He closes the cabinet door, the metal clink sharp and final. On the whiteboard above his desk, a single phrase remains from his earlier notes. "Someday the river gives back." He leaves it there. Some truths deserve to stay visible. Outside, the clouds break. The city exhales steam from manholes, buses sigh at corners, life resumes its endless hum. He gets in his car, the same model as the one that started it all, only newer, cleaner, less haunted. As he drives away from the courthouse, the radio clicks on automatically. Static first, then a voice reading the news. "Portland 1997 cold case finally solved," it says. He listens without flinching this time. The story runs for 48 seconds, then fades into an ad for a hardware store. The world has already moved on. He turns the volume down, lets the static fill the car instead. It sounds almost like rain. He reaches the bridge, slows, looks left where the river coils under gray light. Somewhere under that surface are fragments of other stories waiting their turn. He grips the wheel, the pulse steady under his skin. Maybe there will always be more mysteries. Maybe that's what keeps the world honest, the not knowing. He drives on, headlights slicing through the mist, a man who has learned to carry ghosts gently, as if they were part of the air he breathes. The city forgets in layers, billboards change, streets get repaved, the names of cafes drift like handwriting washed by rain. The case that once swallowed headlines becomes a footnote, a line in a textbook about forensic genealogy and police persistence, but memory has its own stubborn geography. Every so often, something cracks through the pavement. A podcast anniversary episode, a headline about the new DNA Act, a documentary crew asking for interviews. The detective says no to most of them. He has learned that every retelling reopens a wound that prefers to scar. Still, one morning in October, a letter arrives at his house. Real paper, handwriting shaky, no return address, only a Portland postmark. Inside, a single sentence written in blue ink. "You kept your word. Thank you for finding her." No signature. He reads it twice, folds it carefully, and places it inside the file box. He told himself he'd never open again. There are not many moments in a life that feel like permission to breathe. That one does. He takes early retirement that winter. The department holds the kind of party men like him hate. Cheap cake, fluorescent lights, speeches about dedication. The captain shakes his hand, calls him a legend, promises a plaque. He nods and smiles, because that's what you do when people mistake endurance for heroism. On his last walk out, he passes the wall of cold case photos, the faces that never got their second headlines, their answers still buried somewhere under time. He touches one corner of the bulletin board, just enough to feel the tack beneath his fingertip, a silent vow that this will not be his final act of remembering. Outside, snow threatens but never falls. The air smells like iron and pine sap. He drives home slowly, no siren, no scanner, just the hum of tires on wet asphalt. The city shrinking in the rear view like a secret closing its door. At home, his daughter is taller, older, almost finished with school. She greets him with 2 mugs and says, "So this is it?" He smiles. "Maybe." They sit at the kitchen table, the one that has seen 1,000 silent dinners and 100 conversations about nothing. The radio murmurs the weather. She asks him what he'll do now. He says he hasn't decided. "You could write," she suggests. "People would read you." He laughs softly, a sound more rust than joy. Writing means remembering. She nods, understanding more than her age should allow. "Maybe that's why you should." The words land quietly. Find a home somewhere in the part of him that still refuses rest. Weeks slide by. Routine builds itself again. Morning coffee, long walks near the river, the kind of solitude that tastes like medicine on some days and poison on others. He carries no badge, no gun, but habit still drags his eyes toward every alley, every face that lingers too long. He sees ghosts where there are none and finds comfort in recognizing them anyway. The river is different in winter. Slow, swollen, reflective. He stands by its edge and wonders how many stories it keeps, how many it decides to return. Somewhere downstream, fishermen laugh at something he cannot hear. He watches the current carry branches, foam, light, and thinks of all the evidence lost to it. Things no microscope will ever retrieve, but the river knows. It always knows. The mother, meanwhile, moves to a smaller apartment across town. The old house, heavy with memories, had become impossible to clean without crying. She leaves the porch light behind for the new owners, who promise to keep it on. She still volunteers once a week at the Missing Persons Center, helping other families fill out forms, teaching them the cruel math of patience. Sometimes she catches herself telling new mothers what to expect, the reporters, the detectives, the way days turn into decades, and stops mid-sentence, realizing she has become the authority no one wants to meet. On her kitchen wall hangs a framed newspaper clipping. Portland, 1997, cold case solved. DNA hit links ex-neighbor. Below it, a smaller photograph. Her daughter smiling, eyes squinting towards sun. That's how she chooses to remember. Mid-laugh, mid-light, untouched by the night that took her. The podcast ends its final season with a live recording downtown. Tickets sell out. The host dedicates the episode to the ones who wait in the dark. He reads excerpts from police logs, court transcripts, even part of the detective's statement. The audience listens in silence. Then unexpectedly, he plays a recording. The mother's thank you voicemail from months ago. Her voice fills the hall, steady, low, resolute. "You didn't give up," she says, "and because of that, I can finally sleep." The crowd doesn't cheer. They just stand, a wave of quiet recognition moving through them like wind through grass. When the lights come up, the detective is there, standing near the back, hat pulled low. He slips out before anyone notices, his footsteps swallowed by the applause that follows the silence. Time, however, is not sentimental. Years erode details, soften edges. A new wave of cases takes the headlines. Fresher mysteries, sharper footage, clearer villains. The Portland case becomes a precedent, a bullet point in training manuals. Persistence and forensic innovation led to arrest after 27 years. The detective reads that line in a trade journal once and almost laughs. It sounds clinical, neat, as if the years between were just blank lines on a calendar. He imagines the students reading it, sipping coffee, thinking justice is an equation. He wishes he could tell them what it really was: a river, a ring, a porch light, a mother's voice, 100 false starts, and one quiet night where everything finally gave way. Every anniversary, he visits the small memorial near the river bend. Someone, he never learns who, planted a single magnolia tree there, its roots gripping the earth where evidence once slept. A brass plaque at its base reads simply, "She is found." That's all. No names, no dates, just that. On the 5th anniversary, he notices something strange. The soil has been disturbed slightly, not by vandalism, more like care. Fresh flowers, cleaned edges. He looks around and sees a young woman standing a few feet away holding a notebook. She's sketching the tree. He nods. She nods back. "You knew her?" she asks. "I found her," he answers, surprised by the simplicity of his own voice. She closes the notebook gently. "Then I guess you found yourself too." He doesn't reply. Some truths are too fragile to confirm out loud. As the sun lowers, the river catches gold. He stands there until the light fades, listening to the water's whisper against the stones. The sound reminds him of the static on his old radio, that soft, endless hiss between words. He closes his eyes and lets the noise fill him. The past doesn't leave. It learns to hum. It becomes part of the city's background music, in rain gutters, in train wheels, in the sigh of wind against bridges. And somewhere within that sound, if you listen long enough, there's a voice, calm, almost smiling, saying thank you, saying goodbye, saying nothing and everything at once. Later that night, as he drives home, his daughter calls. She's in college now, talking about moving east, about life beyond the city that raised her father's ghosts. "Will you be okay?" she asks. He looks at the road ahead, streetlights flickering across the windshield like frames from an old film. "I will," he says. And for the first time, he believes it. The past is still there, sitting quietly in the passenger seat, but it doesn't weigh the same. It's lighter now, like an old coat you wear out of habit, familiar, weathered, forgiven. He turns left at the bridge, slows, and glances once more at the river below. The magnolia's reflection shimmers in the water. He thinks of the case title that once haunted every headline, Portland 1997 Cold Case Solved, and whispers it like a benediction, soft, final, letting the words drift downstream until they belong to the river again. The years after the trial pass like mist on the river, present, visible, and gone before you can name them. Portland grows new layers, glass towers where there used to be warehouses, coffee shops where there used to be silence. The detective, now just another man in line for groceries, blends into the rhythm of a city that never truly stops. He walks differently now, slower, his body adjusting to the absence of urgency. His hands, once steady from habit, twitch sometimes when the world grows too quiet. That's the leftover electricity of a life spent waiting for something to happen. He keeps a small notebook still, not for cases, but for details that catch his eye. A shoe print on wet pavement, a lost glove by the curb, an old sedan idling under a flickering light. Some habits refuse to retire. He rents a cabin on the edge of Forest Park, the kind of place that smells like cedar and isolation. It becomes both refuge and reminder. On storm nights, when thunder rolls across the Willamette, he imagines the old case files breathing in their archives, restless spirits turning in paper graves. Sometimes he dreams of that cul-de-sac, the headlights, the car, the fog on glass, and wakes with the sound of rain that might be applause or warning. He keeps the radio low, always tuned to a local news station, as if waiting to hear the world stumble into another mystery. He doesn't admit it, but part of him misses the chase, the pulse, the flicker, the feeling of purpose tethered to danger. Justice, after all, was never clean. It was an animal you had to feed with time. The mother writes to him twice a year, brief letters in neat cursive. Spring came late this year. The magnolias blooming early again. I think she would have liked that. He replies with small updates, careful words, nothing sentimental. I've been well. The city's quieter now. I visit sometimes. Their letters cross like migratory birds, short-lived, instinctual, always returning to the same path. She signs her name differently each time, once with her full name, once with just an initial, and once, on the third year, with nothing at all. That one he keeps separate, tucked into the notebook. It feels like the end of something unnamed. His daughter visits when she can. She brings noise, warmth, music, the antidotes to ghosts. She teases him for still listening to the police scanner, though he calls it a radio out of pride. They cook together, argue about seasoning, laugh about trivialities. But sometimes, when conversation drifts to silence, she studies his face and sees the shadow still there, the one that sits behind his eyes when rain starts to fall. One night, she asks softly, "Did finding her fix it?" He doesn't answer right away. "It fixed the story," he finally says, "not the world." She nods, understanding again more than she should, and leaves a hand on his arm for a while before turning on the lamp. The light pools between them, fragile and honest. Meanwhile, the world keeps telling its stories. Another case in Washington, another arrest after decades, another headline with the same rhythm, cold case solved, DNA links suspect to decades-old crime. Each one sounds like an echo of his own. Reporters call him for comment, professors invite him to speak, documentarians beg for permission to recreate his career in dim blue light and orchestral swells. He declines every time. Truth doesn't need narration, it needs silence. And yet, sometimes he stands in front of the television, watching those stories unfold, seeing younger detectives walk the same tightrope he once did, their eyes bright with the promise of closure, their hands trembling over evidence that will take years to yield. He wants to tell them to be patient, to guard their hope, to understand that justice is not an ending, it's a circle. In spring, he returns to the magnolia tree. The petals fall like folded paper, pale pink and soft against the dark earth. He kneels to brush away the debris from the plaque. She is found. Someone has left a photo at its base, laminated to survive the rain. It's of a young girl holding a small cat, smiling at something beyond the camera. He doesn't recognize her, but the gesture feels right. New life, paying quiet respect to old loss. He stands for a while, eyes on the river beyond the tree line. The water glints in the sun, unbothered, unchanged. It's the same river that swallowed evidence and later gave it back. The same that reflected his headlights on the longest nights. He closes his eyes and listens. The sound of current against stone is the same rhythm as a heartbeat. The world is still alive, even after all that it's taken. When he drives home, he takes the long route along the riverfront, past the bridges he used to patrol, past the graffiti that reads, "Time is a witness." He smiles at that. It's crude but true. He parks by the pier and sits, engine off, letting the sound of water and wind fill the silence that has followed him for years. In the reflection of the window, he sees not the detective, but the man behind the work, older, smaller, freer. The rain begins again, faint, rhythmic, tapping like fingers on a desk. He reaches into the glove compartment and pulls out the cracked key fob, the one the evidence room let him keep as a symbol after the case closed. It's just plastic now, meaningless to everyone but him. He holds it for a long moment, then opens the car door and tosses it into the river. The splash is soft, final, the circle closes itself. That night he dreams of the magnolia tree again. But this time it's blooming under starlight, the petals glowing faintly, the sound of the river like a lullaby. The woman stands beside it, not ghostly, not afraid, simply there. She's looking toward the horizon, not at him. "You can rest now," she says, not as command, but as truth. We both can. When he wakes, his heart is calm, the kind of calm that doesn't vanish with the morning. Sunlight breaks through the blinds, sharp and forgiving. He breathes in the smell of rain-soaked earth drifting through the open window. For the first time in decades, it smells like peace. He pours coffee, steps onto the porch, and looks at the world with new eyes. A bird lands on the railing, tilts its head, unbothered by his presence. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wails, a reminder that the city still bleeds, still calls for people to listen. But it no longer sounds like a summons. It sounds like continuity. The river runs, the magnolia blooms, the lights of the city flicker in sequence, and somewhere, behind all that noise, the truth keeps moving, slow and certain, never fully gone. He takes a sip, lets the warmth settle, and smiles. "It's solved," he whispers to the morning, not as a report, but as a release. The words dissolve into the air, carried off by the wind, into the heartbeat of a city that never truly forgets. The air shifts again the following spring, the kind of change that doesn't announce itself but seeps quietly into the fabric of days. Portland feels older, yet somehow lighter, its skyline punctured by cranes and new glass. The detective, though no one calls him that anymore, walks the river path most mornings, keeping rhythm with the joggers and stray dogs. The rain, his lifelong companion, has softened into drizzle, gentle and constant. He's stopped counting anniversaries, not because he's forgotten, but because time has learned to fold in on itself. The old nightmares have faded to fragments, the car with its ghosted windows, the smell of damp asphalt, the echo of a mother's plea. They still visit sometimes, but not with teeth. Now they come as reminders, as whispers from a version of himself he no longer has to be. One morning he stops near the magnolia tree. The plaque catches sunlight, the words almost hidden by moss. He kneels and brushes it clean with the sleeve of his jacket. "She is found." The sentence still hits like a heartbeat. A child's laughter breaks through the hush. Two kids racing bikes along the riverbank, their tires carving arcs into the mud. He watches them and feels something tender, like gratitude wearing the face of grief. He's about to leave when he notices a woman standing a few yards away. Mid-30s maybe, a camera slung around her neck, posture unsure. She's staring at the plaque the way people do when they've stumbled into history by accident. When she realizes he's watching, she smiles apologetically. "I've been photographing memorials," she says. "This one feels different." He nods. "It is." She tilts her head. "Were you involved?" He pauses. "A long time ago," he answers. She doesn't ask more. She just takes one picture, carefully, then thanks him before walking off into the morning fog. For a brief moment, he feels the city hold its breath. Back home, the letters have stopped arriving. The mother passed quietly that winter, he found out through a mutual friend at the department. No ceremony, just a notice in the paper. Beloved teacher, volunteer, advocate. He reads the line twice, tracing the printed words with his thumb. Beneath it, a small quote from her favorite poem. "The river returns everything it takes." He thinks about that for days. At the funeral, a handful of neighbors gather, gray coats against gray sky. He stays near the back, hands clasped, watching the wind scatter magnolia petals over her casket. He doesn't cry. The body learns eventually that tears are not the only proof of feeling. When the service ends, he helps carry flowers to the memorial table. The daughter's photo sits there, her smile untouched by the decades. He whispers a quiet promise to keep the light burning. After the funeral, he finds himself driving again. No destination, just the road unspooling beneath rain. The city blurs past, landmarks fading into one another. He ends up outside the old grocery store, the one built on the site where it all began. He hasn't been back since the trial. The parking lot is full, bright, normal. A mother loads groceries into her car. A teenager checks his phone by the door. Nothing sinister, nothing special, just life. He parks for a moment, engine running, watching the scene through the windshield. The reflection of headlights on wet asphalt brings the past rushing back, but softer now, like a story told through glass. He closes his eyes and exhales. The sound of rain on metal feels like applause again, but this time for survival. When he opens his eyes, the lot is just a lot, and the ghosts have nowhere left to stand. That evening, he sits by the window with a notebook. The pages are half filled, observations, fragments, thoughts he never said aloud. He writes a single line. The city forgets, but the river remembers. Then he closes it. Some truths are best left unfinished. On the shelf above his desk sits a small jar of soil from the Magnolia site, a keepsake the forensic team once gifted him. It's dry now, flecked with gold pollen. When the light hits it just right, it glows. He sometimes wonders if peace is supposed to feel this quiet, this incomplete. Maybe peace isn't the absence of noise. It's learning which echoes to live with. Weeks later, his daughter calls from New York. She's accepted a job there, something big, something bright. He congratulates her, pretending the lump in his throat is just pride. She tells him she wants him to visit. There's a river here too, she says. Different, but kind of the same. He laughs softly. All rivers are the same, he says. They just tell different stories. When the call ends, he looks out the window. Rain streaks the glass, city lights melting into watercolor. He realizes that for the first time, he isn't afraid of moving on. He's part of a world that keeps changing, and that's the point. The next morning, he walks the river again. Fog curls low, hugging the water. A heron stands motionless on a rock, its reflection perfect and fragile. He stops beside it and thinks of all the names that were once mysteries, now whispered like lullabies. The city is awake behind him, horns, brakes, distant chatter. But here, by the water, time pauses. He drops a magnolia petal into the current, watches it spin, drift, vanish. Take it, he says quietly. Take everything. The wind answers with a sigh. Somewhere upstream, bells ring from a church tower. Somewhere downstream, the river carries what's left of the story into the open sea. That night, he dreams one last time. He's walking down the cul-de-sac, the same one from that July night, but this time it's empty, calm, filled with warm light spilling from windows. The Chevy isn't there. The asphalt is dry, the air gentle. The young woman stands by the curb, smiling, not frozen in fear, not trapped in memory. It's over, she says. You can go now. And when he looks down, he sees his own footprints fading into the earth. The sound of the river rises, louder, filling every space until it becomes music. Then, silence, vast and kind. He wakes before dawn, a steady calm in his chest. The world outside is washed clean again, the city glittering under thin fog. He makes coffee, steps onto the porch and listens. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wail and fade, swallowed by morning. He looks toward the river, invisible beyond the rooftops, and feels it moving still. The magnolia blooms again. The porch light glows faintly in the mist. And for the first time in his life, the silence doesn't sound like absence. It sounds like peace. He wakes early now, long before the city does, out of habit more than need. Dawn slides quietly over Portland, a gray-pink film that turns windows into mirrors. He moves through the small house in the half-light, careful with the sound of doors, with the rhythm of his steps, as if the world might startle and vanish. The kettle hisses. The river breathes beyond the horizon. He opens the curtains and watches mist crawl along the streets, a patient creature finding its way home. Every morning feels the same. Measured, deliberate, forgiving. He has grown into that silence, learned how to live inside it without drowning. On the counter lies the old leather notebook he hasn't written in weeks. The last line reads, "The river never forgets, it just forgives slowly." He traces the words with one finger, feeling their weight. He knows the case will always be the spine of his life, even if the story around it has finished speaking. That summer, a local journalist writes a retrospective, 28 years later, the case that changed Portland. She asks for an interview, promises sensitivity, promises to treat it like history. He declines politely. Truth doesn't need another retelling. It already lives in too many voices. Still, the world keeps finding him. Letters, calls, students writing essays about the cold case that taught police departments to believe in time again. Some send him copies. He reads a few. One catches him off guard. What is justice if it arrives after everyone stops waiting? The question stays in his head for days. He walks along the river and lets it echo. Justice isn't a clean arrival. It's a ripple, late, uneven, but still reaching shore. One afternoon, while clearing old boxes, he finds the evidence tag from the cracked key fob. It's yellowed now, the ink fading. For a moment, he's back in that interview room, hearing the man's calm voice describe horror as if reciting errands. He feels the weight of every hour that came after, every dead lead, every sleepless night. And yet the anger that once lived inside him has thinned into something softer. Not forgiveness, but understanding of what pain can't fix. He sits by the window, the tag between his fingers, until dusk folds around him. Then he slips it into an envelope marked archive and sets it aside. Some ghosts deserve quiet shelves. The magnolia blooms early that year, weeks before the rest of the city remembers spring. Its petals scatter across the memorial path like confetti from an invisible parade. He visits often, less as duty now and more as instinct. He always brings a single candle, small, white, unscented. He lights it and watches the flame resist the wind. On one visit, a stranger approaches, a young man, maybe in his 20s, wearing a faded hoodie with a police academy logo. "Sir," he says, nervous, "I'm studying the case. They told us about you." The detective smiles faintly. "That's unfortunate," he replies. The boy laughs, relieved. "They said you taught everyone what patience means." The man shakes his head. "No, she did." The boy looks confused for a moment, then nods, understanding enough. Before leaving, he asks if there's one thing he should remember when working a case. The detective thinks, then says, "Don't look for closure. Look for truth. Closure's just a headline." The boy scribbles it down as if it were scripture. Evenings are slower now. He's taken to reading novels again, the kind that care more about atmosphere than endings. He listens to jazz on the old radio, the static blending with saxophones, the music wandering like thought. Sometimes he thinks of the river as a band playing its endless song, improvised, chaotic, never out of tune. On nights when the rain taps the roof like Morse code, he sits on the porch, coffee cooling in his hands, and talks quietly to the dark. Not prayers, not regrets, just small updates. "She's remembered," he says once. "The city's better for it." The wind answers with a rustle that sounds almost like yes. His daughter visits in late summer. She's confident now, her voice fast and sure, her stories full of airports and deadlines. She tells him about New York, its noise, its hunger, its pulse. He listens, smiling. "You'd hate it," she says. "Too loud." He chuckles. "Maybe that's what I need." They drive out to the river the next morning, parking near the Magnolia. She stands by the plaque for a long time. "I never met her," she says softly, "but I feel like I did." He nods. "You did, in a way. You grew up in the shadow of her story." She looks at him. "Then maybe it's time you tell a new one." He doesn't answer. The thought terrifies and comforts him all at once. In September, he starts writing again. Not about the case, not directly, but about people. Short sketches of strangers, moments caught in the city's flow. A barista counting tips, an old man feeding pigeons, a woman humming in traffic. Each scene no longer needs resolution. He writes because he wants to remember that life continues in small, stubborn ways. Words come easier now, lighter. Some nights he writes until dawn, the room glowing in that quiet hour before morning breaks. When he finishes the last page of his notebook, he doesn't read it back. He just closes it gently, the way you close a door on a room you've already visited enough. Autumn arrives with its orange hush. The river thickens, fog laying low over its surface like a second skin. One evening, he walks the bridge alone. Below, city lights shiver on the water. He leans against the railing and watches the reflection blur, merge, disappear. Behind him, traffic hums, indifferent, alive. For a fleeting second, he feels the weight of every unsolved case in the world pressing against his chest. Thousands of names still waiting for their echo. He whispers something only the wind can hear. "May you all be found." Then he steps back, hands in pockets, and keeps walking. That night, the magnolia loses its last petal. It drifts down to the riverbank, joining the endless procession of leaves, twigs, and forgotten things the current carries away. In the distance, thunder rolls, soft, tired, like a heart remembering how to beat. He sleeps easily. No dreams this time, no ghosts, no questions. Just the rhythm of rain and the quiet knowledge that the world, broken as it is, keeps turning toward light. Winter finds him quietly, the way memory always does, without warning, through a crack in the window or the faint smell of wet pine. The first frost whitens the banks of the Willamette, and the city folds into itself, smaller, softer. He no longer wakes before dawn. Age has loosened its grip on routine. Some mornings he sleeps until the sky goes pale and the radio murmurs half a song before the news cuts in. There are still headlines about cold cases being solved through DNA, and every time he hears that phrase, after decades of silence, he stops whatever he's doing. It isn't nostalgia, it's recognition, a private salute to those still fighting the river's current. He has moved again, this time to a smaller apartment overlooking the bridge. The magnolia tree is still visible from here, a faint shape in the distance. On misty days, it disappears completely, as if swallowed by the weather, and he likes it that way. Things should fade. It's how the world remembers to rest. The neighbors hardly know him, though they nod politely in the hallway. To them, he's just another quiet old man with tired eyes and a careful gait. He prefers it. Fame, he's learned, is another kind of noise. One evening in December, a package arrives at his door. No return address, only a single name scrawled on the back, his daughter's. Inside is a small, hardback book. The title reads, The River's Witness, Stories of Justice and Time. He turns the pages and realizes she has written it herself, a collection of essays about unsolved mysteries, grief, and the slow machinery of truth. In the dedication, for my father, who taught me that silence is not the end of a story. He sets the book down carefully, as if it might break. He doesn't cry, but the air in the room feels heavier, blessed somehow. That night he dreams of her as a child again, running down the hallway, her laughter colliding with the world like sunlight against glass. Snow arrives 2 days later, the rare kind that sticks in Portland, coating everything in delicate disbelief. The river moves slower, its surface veined with ice. He takes his coat and hat and walks to the Magnolia. The park is empty, the air sharp and full of static. The plaque is half buried under white. He brushes it clean with his gloved hand. The words glint faintly. She is found. He stands there for a long while, the city muffled around him. From somewhere far off comes the distant hum of a train, that long, mournful sound that always feels like time leaving and returning at once. You're remembered, he says quietly, not just in evidence, in people. His voice fogs in the cold, hangs for a second, then disappears into the wind. Later, he stops by a diner he used to haunt during the investigation years. Same neon sign, same cracked vinyl booths. Inside, a younger waitress greets him with the warmth reserved for regulars, though he hasn't been one for decades. He orders black coffee. Across from him, 2 off-duty officers eat breakfast, their voices low but excited. You hear about the case in Idaho? One says. 30 years cold. Family genealogy hit again. The other shakes his head, impressed. Crazy, isn't it? These days, nothing really stays hidden. The detective listens without intruding. When they leave, they nod to him out of courtesy, unaware of who he is, of what he's carried. He watches them go, smiling faintly. The future is always younger than you expect. At home, he starts reading his daughter's book. The writing is calm, lyrical, more patient than any report he ever filed. She writes about the balance between remembering and letting go, about the invisible thread that connects the living to the lost. He reads until the words blur. One passage stops him completely. My father once said, justice is a kind of echo. It comes back to you, but never in the shape you expect. He closes the book, eyes fixed on the quiet. The echo is here now, in this small room, gentle, human, alive. Days shorten, nights stretch long. He spends them at the window, watching headlights slide over the wet streets like veins of light. The city looks different in winter, honest, stripped of pretense. Somewhere, a siren rises and fades, a soft reminder that someone else is out there searching, piecing together another puzzle. He raises his cup to the sound, an old man's toast to persistence. On New Year's Eve, fireworks ripple across the skyline. He turns off the lights and watches through the glass. Each burst paints the river in temporary color, red, gold, blue, then darkness swallows it again. The reflection reminds him of everything that has ever mattered, that beauty and pain share the same sky, that nothing stays lit forever, but every flare means someone still believes in light. When the final firework fades, he whispers the headline that once changed his life, the one carved into his bones. Portland, 1997 cold case solved. But this time, the words don't sound like a report. They sound like a lullaby. He sits for a while longer, breathing with the rhythm of the city, until the cold seeps in and he decides to sleep. Before turning off the lamp, he glances at the book on the table. The magnolia's shadow sways faintly on the wall, projected by the streetlight outside. The petals are long gone, but their memory is permanent. He smiles, pulls the blanket over his shoulders, and lets the room fall into silence. Somewhere below, the river moves unseen, slow and eternal, carrying stories toward the ocean, carrying him too, gently, without hurry, into whatever peace waits beyond remembering. By the time spring returns again, Portland has changed its face once more. The skyline stretches higher, brighter, new glass buildings slicing through clouds where warehouses once stood. The magnolia by the river blooms early, almost defiantly, a stubborn streak of white in a city still half asleep. He walks there one morning, slow, steady, each step a conversation with the earth. The path smells of rain and new grass. Joggers pass, nodding politely, their earbuds sealing them inside younger worlds. To them he's invisible, just another shadow along the riverbank. He likes that. There's peace in being unseen. The plaque is still there, tarnished now, the letters shallow from weather but legible. She is found. He kneels and clears the moss with a small brush he keeps in his pocket, a ritual not of grief but of care. As he works, he notices someone has added a new object beside the tree, a white stone, smooth, engraved with a single word, home. He runs his thumb over it, feeling the shallow grooves, the weight of that word, home. He whispers it once, then lets it fall back into the silence. At the cafe nearby, he orders black coffee, sits by the window facing the river. The barista doesn't know him, but the owner does, an old friend from the department days, now half retired. They exchange a quiet nod, no words. On the TV above the counter, another story runs. Nevada, 1998, cold case solved. DNA match leads to ex-cop's arrest. The sound cuts in and out, but the rhythm is familiar. He watches, expressionless, until the segment ends. Another ghost laid to rest. Another circle closed. It's strange, he thinks, how justice sounds the same everywhere, like rain hitting pavement. His phone buzzes, a message from his daughter, a photo, her holding her newborn son, tiny, wrapped in a blue blanket. Underneath, a single line, his name is River. He stares at the screen, and for a long time nothing moves inside him. Then, slowly, something opens, a warmth that rises behind his ribs, patient, unhurried, like dawn. He types back only 2 words, he'll flow. She replies with a heart, simple and certain. The circle expands again. Days pass gently. He visits the bookstore downtown, now carrying his daughter's book in the local authors section. He runs his fingers along the spines, finds her name, smiles. The clerk asks if he wants a signed copy. Already have one, he says, and walks out into the thin sunlight. Across the street, a mural catches his eye, new, vivid. It shows the river winding through the city, a ribbon of blue and white, and above it, painted words in uneven letters. Everything returns. He stands there until the light changes, until cars start to honk, and only then does he move on. At night, the city hums below his window. He sits with the lamp low, reading through old notebooks. The pages are fragile, browned at the edges, smelling faintly of dust and ink. He finds a line from years ago, written in a hurried scrawl. The dead do not ask to be found. The living ask for permission to stop looking. He closes the book. Outside, the river glitters faintly under streetlight. The sound of water through the open window is enough to keep him company. He no longer needs answers. He just needs that rhythm. In late summer, his daughter visits with the baby. The boy's eyes are wide and serious, his small hand clutching his grandfather's finger like an anchor. They walk to the magnolia together, the air thick with heat and the scent of flowers. The child babbles softly, reaching toward the branches. He likes the light, she says. Good, he replies. He'll need it. They sit in the grass for a long time, saying little, watching sunlight tremble through leaves. A breeze stirs, carrying the smell of the river. He closes his eyes and feels the weight of every season collapsing into this one moment. Past, present, promise. That evening, after they leave, he walks back alone. The path is quiet, except for the low murmur of crickets and the far-off whir of traffic. He stops halfway across the bridge, the one that overlooks the curve of the river. The water below is dark, full, moving with the kind of grace only time can teach. He leans on the railing and whispers to the current, the way one might to a friend. She's home now, we all are. The river answers in ripples and wind. Back at the apartment, he finds an envelope slipped under the door. No name. Inside, a photograph, black and white, printed from a negative. It's the old cul-de-sac, the Chevy visible in the frame, headlights on. Someone has written on the back, taken July 1997, found in archives, thought you should have it. He sits down, heart steady but eyes burning. He studies the photo for a long time. It doesn't scare him anymore. It's history now, a frozen moment, tamed by time. He places it inside the last page of his notebook and closes it gently. A record, complete. He falls asleep by the window, the city's sounds folding around him. The low thrum of traffic, the sigh of wind, the slow heartbeat of Portland itself. In his dream, the magnolia blooms again, its petals luminous under starlight. The river gleams silver, stretching endlessly, carrying names, stories, fragments of lives downstream toward the unseen sea. And there she is, standing by the water's edge, smiling, untouched by fear, turning once toward him before fading into light. When he wakes, the sky is just beginning to brighten. He opens the window and breathes in the cool air. Somewhere, a baby cries softly in another apartment. A cat yowls in an alley, and a train horn cuts through the dawn. All the sounds of life continuing, he whispers, everything returns. And for once, it feels true. Not as hope, not as faith, but as fact. The river keeps moving, carrying its stories, its ghosts, its peace. And he, like everything else, finally learns to move with it. Morning arrives without ceremony. Light seeps slowly across the walls of the small apartment, tracing the outlines of books, photographs, a half-empty cup of coffee left from the night before. The city hums below, steady and indifferent. He sits on the edge of the bed, listening. There's that faint vibration again, the river in the distance, the pulse of trains, a seagull calling from somewhere beyond the bridge. Every sound feels connected, as if the whole city breathes through the same lungs. He stands, stretches, and opens the window. Air slides in, cool, full of rain. The smell is the same as it was all those years ago. Wet asphalt, iron, cedar. The smell of the night, everything changed. He makes coffee slowly, the way people do when there's no schedule left to obey. The newspaper lies on the counter, folded to a headline about another cold case solved, another ghost given a name. He doesn't read it. He knows how those stories end, how the world claps for closure while the ones who searched learn that closure isn't real, only quieter. He pours coffee into his favorite chipped mug, sits by the window and watches the city stretch into morning. A young couple walks by holding hands. A delivery truck hisses at the curb. Somewhere, a child laughs so loudly it startles the pigeons from the ledge. He smiles. The world has rebuilt itself exactly as it should. On the table rests the photograph. The cul-de-sac, the car, the faint ghost of headlights and fog. He keeps it there not as reminder, but as proof that some darknesses can be named. Next to it, the smooth white stone with the word home carved shallow. He touches it each morning, a quiet ritual, a way of saying he's still here. The magnolia outside the window is losing its petals again, each one a pale confession drifting toward the ground. He thinks of her, the girl who never got to grow old, the mother who never stopped waiting, the years that stitched their pain into his own. And he whispers the same line he has whispered for decades. You're safe now. The phone buzzes, a message from his daughter. River took his first steps today. A video follows. The boy toddles across a living room floor, hands raised, face alight with triumph. The sound of laughter fills the room, his daughter's, her husband's, the child's small squeal of discovery. He watches it twice, maybe 3 times, then sets the phone down and closes his eyes. For the first time, he feels the weight inside him shift completely. Still there, but lighter, transformed into something that no longer hurts. Legacy, he thinks. That's what this is. Not medals, not files, not headlines, just the quiet continuation of breath. By afternoon, the rain thickens. He walks to the river anyway, umbrella closed, coat collar turned up. The path is slick, the air metallic. The magnolia tree waits ahead, the plaque dim under water droplets. Someone has left new flowers, lilies this time, wrapped in paper. He kneels, adjusts them so they won't fall, and places his palm flat against the damp metal. Thank you, he says, not sure who the words are for. Maybe her, maybe himself, maybe the river. The current below murmurs in reply, endless, patient. He watches it move, carrying leaves and bits of light. Every ripple feels like a heartbeat, every bend a sentence finishing itself. He crosses the bridge at twilight. The city glows behind him, the buildings mirrored on the water. The wind smells of ozone and something almost sweet, like endings disguised as beginnings. Cars pass in slow procession, headlights streaking through fog. He stops halfway across and leans on the railing, eyes tracing the horizon. Downstream, he can just see the faint shimmer where the river meets the sea. It reminds him of her final smile in the dream, the calm acceptance, the sense that nothing was truly lost, only transformed. The thought settles over him like warmth. He stays there a while, until the streetlights flicker on and the sky folds into deep blue. When he returns home, the apartment is dark except for the lamp near the window, the photograph, the stone, the cup, all exactly as he left them. He sets his coat on the chair, sits, and lets the quiet hold him. The rain starts again, soft and deliberate, tapping against the glass like a heartbeat he's known forever. He closes his eyes and listens, not for ghosts, not for answers, but for rhythm. Outside, the river moves through the city, steady as breath, gathering everything it has ever carried: evidence, memory, grief, forgiveness, love. It all flows the same way now, forward. He exhales, a long, even breath that feels like release. Then he opens his eyes, looks out at the faint shimmer of streetlight on wet pavement, and speaks the words one last time. Gentle, final, true. Portland, 1997 cold case solved. No headline anymore, no shock, just a statement of fact folded into the night, joining the current. The river receives it, keeps it, and carries it away.